We'll call this meeting, this regular meeting of the El Paso Metropolitan Organization TPB Board to order. Can we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Mr. Caldwell, can you please call the roll?
Here.
Gladly. Now that we have, I think, quorum. All right, Chair Walter Miller,
Here.
Vice Chair Ricardo Samaniego,
Here.
the Senator Cesar Blanco, Representative Rudy Cruz, Senator Coronado, Trent Doolittle, Representative Art Fierro, Representative Mary Gonzalez, City Manager Tommy Gonzalez.
Here.
Representative Cassandra Hernandez,
Present.
Yvette Hernandez,
Present.
Commissioner Olguin,
Here.
Mayor Leeser,
Here.
Mayor Manuel Leos,
Here.
Representative Cici Lizárraga,
Morning here.
Representative Willie Madrid, Representative Joe Moody, Representative Claudia Ordaz Perez, Representative Lina Ortega, Norma Palacios,
Here.
Mayor Perea, Mayor Isela Reyes,
Morning here.
Representative Henry Rivera, Sam Rodriguez, Mayor Benjamin Romero, Commissioner Manuel Sanchez, Commissioner Sanchez, Ellen Smythe, Tomás Treviño, and Mayor Diana Murillo.
Present.
All right, so we do have quorums.
We do have quorum. Thank you all. Okay, our next item is the open comment period. Anyone signed up for open comment? Yeah. No one has signed up. Okay, we can go on to the first item. Mr. Caldwell?
All right, so item number 1 is to approve the minutes of the May 20, 2022 TPB meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
All right. Item number 2 is consider amendments to the amended Destino 2045 Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Destino 2021-2024 Transportation Improvement Program to increase funding for the New Mexico 213 widening preliminary engineering phase by $1,800,000 for a new total funding of $4,200,000. And we have here Andreas Linden from New Mexico DOT with a short presentation.
Good morning, Andreas Linden, NMDOT District 1, Mr. Chair, Committee. I'm here today to ask or answer any questions to the request to amend our design budget. This project is the interchange and expansion of New Mexico 213 that we're preparing currently to be prepared for the Borderland Express, or formerly Northeast Parkway expansion project that TxDOT is planning. We have the widening project of the roadway to a 4-lane facility covered, but during the project design, we identified the need for an interchange improvement in the form of a flyover. So that additional funding will pay for the design of that bridge structure. At this point.
Question? Is there a motion?
Move to approve, Mr. Chair.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. All right, so item number 3 is to consider acceptance of the June 2022 project readiness report, and we have Jeff Howell here with a brief presentation.
Morning, Chair and TPB members. Jeff Howell with the MPO. Item 3 on the agenda is the June 2022 Project Readiness Report. Today, I'll just provide an overview of the report that was provided as part of the backup. There are a total of 10 entities with a total of 25 projects as part of the readiness report for FY 2022 through 2024. As you may recall, we do include alerts on projects to let both you and the individual entities know that there may be issues slowing down the projects when compared to our standard project development timeline. A low alert means that one element is not falling within the typical timeline. A medium alert has 2 elements. A high alert has 3 or more. Overall, with the June readiness report, there are just 1 project that has an alert, 2 that have medium, and no high alerts. And this was updated through coordination after the TPAC meeting. We did include in the backup the project development timeline as well. To begin, with the City of El Paso, only one of their projects has a low alert, which is the ITS infrastructure project. It was just 1 item specifically for the percentage of completion for the environmental document not falling within the timeline. All the other projects seem to be on track, with one of them being an RMS 2020 project. The next project is for Doña Ana County, which in this case now has no alerts for the industrial grade separation project. This project is unique, however, that it does use FRA funds, so it's handled a bit differently as compared to the other projects. Moving on to El Paso County and the town of Horizon, there are no alerts on their projects, but just wanted to mention that they are all RMS 2020 projects. Next is NMDOT, which they just have 1 project with an alert, and this is for NM 404 widening, which has a medium alert, as 2 dates are not falling within the typical timeline. The next 2 entities, Socorro and Sun Metro, did not have any alerts, and one of their projects is an RMS 2020 project as well. Sunland Park did have an item with a medium alert, which is for the Rio Grande Trail Phase 2 project. This has a medium alert, as 2 dates have passed for the items, which are the right-of-way still not being complete, and the estimated let date is still shown as May 2022. The entity has been informed that the funds cannot roll over to FY23. And then finally, the last entity with projects is TxDOT. None of their projects have alerts, and several of the TxDOT projects are RMS 2020 projects. And that concludes my presentation.
Very well. Any questions on the readiness report? Ms. Mike?
Said the money won't roll over to next year, so if they don't hurry up, it's gone?
I believe so, and just a portion for that, those funds. That's
Any further discussion? I would entertain a motion to accept the readiness report.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. I was remiss when we started this. Everything started a little disjointedly, I should say. So we need to recognize our newest members, the policy board, Mary Cela Reyes, Fernando Sadio.
Welcome, Mayor Reyes.
And thank you for coming today.
You're lucky she came today.
Okay.
All right, so item number 4 is to consider authorizing use of fiscal years 2024, 2025 transportation alternative set aside TASA program funds for preliminary engineering design project phase. So as background, this item was discussed at TPAC, and I believe we have the TPAC chair on video. If you are, Mr. Landeros, can you please unmute your phone, or your microphone, I mean?
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Cargo. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. Jose Landeros with Transportation Project Advisory Committee for El Paso County. The item that is before you this morning is an item to consider authorizing the use of transportation alternative set-aside funding for design services for various projects that would be submitted to the MPO for fiscal years 2024 and 2025. This funding program is very popular with all agencies across the region, as this helps agencies implement solutions that are truly multimodal to help introduce sidewalks and pedestrian and cyclist connectivity in areas where there may not be any. Guidance from the state has evolved over the past year, and this new round of funding, design services could be included, whereas previously only construction was eligible. So TPAC is recommending that the board consider allowing the use of these funds for design services. We feel that it's in line with what the state has done in managing its TASA program, because the state, through TechStop, manages a separate, a similar program for non-urbanized areas, and design services have been allowed there, so we feel it's consistent with what the state practice is. The only item for discussion that TPAC recommended the board consider this morning is whether or not to make any restrictions on who can tap into those design funds. Previously, the board has set aside funding specifically for the smaller regional municipalities to have access to design funds to begin project development, to ensure that projects are ready to go in a timely fashion. And namely, the city of El Paso and El Paso County were excluded from accessing those funds. So the TPAC wanted to share that point with the board this morning and recommend that the board have a conversation about whether or not the city and county would be eligible for the design funds, or whether it would be limited to just the smaller regional municipalities. So that concludes my comments and my presentation on this item. We are recommending that PE be allowed, but again, just urge the board to have a conversation about any possible exclusions from larger agencies. And I'm happy to take any questions that the board may have.
I have a question for Mr. Londeros. In the process of this, when projects are evaluated for funding, does TPAC make that evaluation?
Yes, sir. We work with Mr. Godwell and the staff to come up with the evaluation criteria, and we would, in that form, is, when we set aside an ad hoc committee that is appointed by the chair of TPAC. They evaluate applications. We try to limit it to individuals who are not going to be submitting applications, so that we have an objective analysis of the project. And then after that, the committee brings a recommendation back to TPAC for discussion, and then we send that recommendation over to the policy board.
And to date, that evaluation criteria is not yet formulated?
That's correct. The staff and TPAC will be working on setting up that criteria once the project call is ready to be sent out.
The reason I bring this up is if part of the criteria is the number of people served, it often precludes any of the smaller jurisdictions from participating. So I don't necessarily object to the larger jurisdictions having access to the funding, as long as there is some protection in the criteria, in the selection criteria, to make it, to even the playing field for the smaller jurisdictions. Understand that sometimes this is the only source of funds for the smaller jurisdiction. The larger jurisdictions have other sources that they can go to just by matters of scale. So should we allow the larger jurisdictions, should we allow this at all, and should we allow the larger jurisdictions to access this? I think there should be some sort of protection in there to even the playing field for the smaller jurisdictions.
Or we could just do as suggested and exclude the larger jurisdictions, right?
Is that a motion?
That's the other option, right?
Yes, that is an option. We can keep it like, we can keep it like it is now and continue to monitor that. But
Mr. Chair, let me just clarify. The question here is only for design funds,
yes,
right?
yes.
So should design funds be eligible for TASA funds? In the past, they were not. It was only, the funding was reserved just for construction, right? So the first clarification is that PE funds should not be awarded only for design. There has to be a construction phase attached to it, right? Because we don't want just to spend money in designing it and not have the commitment to build it. So it has to be the complete package. That's one question. The second one about leveling the playing field. in my experience, what I've seen, and I'll turn to MPO staff and to Mr. Landeros, but typically the projects really score mostly on their merits, not so much on the number of people that are served and all that. It's one project, the scoring criteria is looking at at the merits of the project itself, right? Not necessarily if it's sponsored by a large or a small community. So I think basically the criteria that has been used in the past that I think is relevant here is project readiness, right? So if you're asking for design funds, well then your project will not be ready for construction until later, right? Because it takes time to design it, right? But I don't think in this case, and this is just my recommendation here, we shouldn't penalize a project because it's asking for design funding, right? Automatically, if you're going to design it yourself, right, your project will likely be ready sooner, right? So you'll be ready for construction sooner, right? As opposed to if you want to use the TASA funds for design, well, your project is going to be ready later, right? So it's a trade-off. So what I'm saying here is that the project readiness may not be also one of the criteria that should be included in selecting projects.
If I heard you say this right, you said that if you apply for these funds, you not only have to have you're not only asking for design funds, but you're asking for construction funds
Correct.
also. So you have to allocate that funding. However, is there a time limit on the use of these funds?
Yes, with TAS, I believe that there is a time limit. However, in the conversations that we had with TxDOT staff, and I'm looking at Jeff or Gabby to chime in, what is important here is that when you apply for the funds, let's say that you are applying for design funds, that your schedule makes sense, right? Not to schedule the design phase and construction phase in the same fiscal year, because likely you're not going to be ready for that, right? But your schedule, make sure that the schedule is makes sense, so that you can program the design in a certain year, and then the construction phase later on.
Another question of clarity. How can you have a construction phase estimate without the design? So you're asking for a project package that includes design and construction. Do you just come up with an estimate and request funding, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, I mean, we always do that. There are ways of establishing planning level cost estimates. It's not just pulling an estimate out of the air, right? So when the entity that sponsors the project, we work with them and to make sure that planning level estimate is reasonable, right? I mean, of course, as you design, you get a better idea of more details on the cost estimate and all that. But there are ways of doing it. So we will work with all the entities to make sure that those initial planning level cost estimates are reasonable. And there's ways of looking at it. There is cost per linear, unit costs that we can use. We can look at prior projects that are similar and look at what it cost and so on.
So just a quick question. So given the volatility right now of estimates, in New Mexico, we're at about 40% higher on our estimates. If we award these projects and then the market stabilizes or drops down, and the estimates were high at this time and they don't need as much money, can that money be redistributed somewhere else, or is...
Yep, definitely. I mean, as we move forward and we see what happens in general, in the market, what inflation is doing and all that, we can adjust those before we program the funds in the tip, right? Well, for the projects that are selected, and even then, later on the estimate can be adjusted, right? So yeah, it's a matter of being cautious, conservative, but we don't want to go overboard and overestimate, right? Because we're going to be freezing good money that could be used for other projects as well.
Sure.
If I could just add that typically what TPEC has worked to do is also identify any projects that might be alternates. So in the event that Doolittle described does occur, we can pivot and have projects that are ready to go that have already been vetted and recommended, and we're not making mid-year recommendations to the board for programming after we work with staff. And at the same time, with this last round of funding, because market volatility was such an issue for construction, there were some projects that actually ended up needing additional funding that because there was balances available in certain years, that balance was able to be programmed onto that project and help overcome the shortfall. So it's really just a matter of plugging and programming funding in a way that is very flexible, but at the same time tied directly to a lot of these projects. So we do anticipate being able to do that. We usually have a very healthy submission rate for these types of projects. So having a primary set and alternates ready to go right behind them is definitely something that we can consider at TPAC before we bring something to the policy board in the future.
Mr. Cruz?
Yeah, so my question was, if I'm understanding correctly, should a municipality identify a project that they wish to begin within their jurisdiction? If I'm understanding correctly, the funding that's being used for the design phase, should a municipality front that funding? You're saying that a project can get off the ground quicker? Should the design phase be covered by the municipality and then apply for the TASA funding for construction rather than apply for the TASA funding for design and construction, which is the trade-off that you're talking about, which is time for money at the end of the day?
Yeah, it typically, I mean, it all depends, right? But typically, if you design on your own, you can start the project sooner. You don't have to wait for, to get selected and go through the tip process and, all the bureaucracy that we have to go through, right? So typically, if you can design your project and have it ready, almost shovel ready, right? And you save time and in many cases, your project is more competitive, when it comes to construction funds. I mean, the city has done that on City of El Paso. The county has also done, a lot of design using their own funding to have the project ready. But in this case, again, with the TASA funds in the past, the policy was not to allow for design. And MPO staff made the recommendation to make it, eligible, right? Because again, like we were saying, especially with the smaller communities, these projects are important, and you may not have the cash flow. Even if you wanted to, you may not have the ability to use your own funding for design. But what happened, as Mr. Landeros explained, the discussion at TPAC was if the larger entities like the City of El Paso and El Paso County should be excluded from being able to use that. And that's something that, as staff, we're not necessarily recommending, but we wanted to have the discussion here at the board.
Ms. Mike?
So many of us in the room are members of the Council of Government. And the Council of Government, what they agreed to do on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee for the solid waste funding is to disallow the city. I think the county still gets some of the money, but then if they run out of time, like for, if it's clear within 9 months they're not going to spend the money, that money is automatically given to the City of El Paso, because we always have sidewalks gaps. We're always ready, always. And so we can spend the money so we don't lose it. And so how much money are we even talking about? How much money is in this program fund?
Jeff or Gabby, we're not talking a lot. I mean, this is about $2 million a year.
Yeah.
I mean,
many of the city projects are way, I wouldn't turn my nose up at it, but I think it would benefit the smaller communities more than it would for us. But on the other hand, I don't want to lose the money. And every penny towards another sidewalk gap is another sidewalk gap. So if we could, rather than go to an alternative that might or might not be ready, just say we're going to give it to a smaller community, but if it's not encumbered or if it's not going to meet the timeline, then it's going to come over to the city or the county to spend the money.
We have precedent here. We did that before on another program for design, where we reserved design funds for smaller municipalities until a certain time, and then it became available. And if I remember right, the smaller communities didn't use it very well. I mean, there were often overages.
Well, the policy, that policy is still technically in place, but if you recall, when the board approved the RMS 2020 program, that assigned design funds to the smaller communities, or part of the coordination was to have somebody else design projects for the smaller communities in the case, and not just for the smaller communities, but in the case of the Sean Haggerty project where TechStud is fronting the design. The same for the project with Horizon City, right? The city of Socorro does have some Category 7 money for design. So, and the same for Vinton, right? There are design funds for the Valley Chili. So, so the spirit of the policy is there. What we really want to do is make sure that everybody their priority projects move forward, and figure out a way to make sure that design funds are not a roadblock, no pun intended, to get these projects done.
Mr. Chair, Harrison Flord with El Paso MPO staff. Just to clarify, it's about $3 million for each fiscal year.
$3 million. Okay. Not a ton of money. Okay, the questions before us today are, number one, to allow the funds to be used for design. And number two, should we continue with the restriction again to disallow the county and the city of El Paso from using them for design? So those are the two questions. Do I have a suggestion? Would someone like to make that motion?
I'll make it.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. And to clarify, that is to allow the funding and also to continue to restrict the funding to the smaller municipalities for design only. Further discussion? You okay?
No.
Motion?
Yes. Mr. Chair, just to be clear, because so the answer to allow design to be eligible is yes, and also yes to restricting so that the county and the city of El Paso are not allowed to use those funds for design.
For design, they're still eligible to use them for construction. Everybody okay with that? Yes. I have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, it's a long way to get there, but
All right, so item number 5 is consider adopting evaluation criteria for the El Paso MPO New Mexico Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Mandatory Program Call for Projects. And I believe we have a Gabby Lopez from MPO staff on video.
Yes. Hi, good morning. Gabriela Lopez, Transportation Financial Analyst with the El Paso MPO. So as mentioned in previous meetings, we will be conducting a call for projects for the New Mexico Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program. This program provides funding for transportation projects, particularly in areas of non-attainment, with the purpose of reducing traffic congestion and improving air quality. So before we open the call for projects, we want to ensure that for all the interested applicants, the evaluation criteria is included in the documentation for the announcements. The MPO currently does not have an evaluation criteria for this project call, therefore we wanted to ensure that it was approved by both the Project Advisory Committee and the TPB. So we did review FHWA guidance, and it does indicate that CMAQ projects should be reviewed based on evaluation criteria that includes emissions reductions, cost effectiveness, and other regional and planning goals. In your backup documentation is the proposed evaluation criteria and scoring that MPO staff is proposing. This includes evaluation criteria from total emissions reductions, which would be relative to the projects that are submitted, project cost effectiveness, which again would be relative to the CMAQ analysis that is included within the application submitted, and the cost of the projects themselves. Congestion reduction, how is this project achieving one of the main purposes of the program? Transportation equity, connectivity and accessibility, and safety, which have been identified as some of our regional and planning goals within our new RMS 2050 MCP. So as I mentioned, the call for projects is for the El Paso MPO planning area in New Mexico only, and it's for the non-attainment areas region that this funding is provided. So we are anticipating that this call for projects will open on June 24th, which is next Friday, and included in the backup documentation is the draft announcement and timeline. The first deadline included in that timeline would be to submit a draft application by July 15th. We have an estimated amount of $1.9 million of CMAQ funds per year to program from fiscal years 2023 to 2025. And as I mentioned, a CMAQ analysis is required as part of the application to demonstrate the emissions reduction benefit for the project. So that concludes my presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions you all may have.
We have a question.
Mr. Chair, let me just add one more thing. Typically, the CMAQ projects in the state of New Mexico, we don't get a lot. So the intent is not to make this, criteria overly complicated and looking at the city of Sunland Park and Anthony, New Mexico, we want to encourage them to really think about these projects. So regardless of the evaluation criteria, because we don't get a lot of good CMAQ projects, and MPO staff is more than happy to help the entities in Doña Ana County as well come up with good CMAQ projects and help them make them competitive. And it's not a lot of money, but we do need those CMAQ projects to be programmed and executed.
Any further questions?
Mr. Chair.
I have a motion for approval. And a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Aye. Carried.
Item 6, consider authorizing the executive director to sign a letter of support for the City of El Paso fiscal year 2022 infra grant application for needs assessment of the Regional International Ports of Entry System. We have David Coronado from the City of El Paso with a brief presentation. You're on, David?
Good morning, everybody. Happy to be with you all this morning, board members. Thank you all for having us today. So we have essentially it's a repeat item from last month's meetings with all of you. So if you recall, last month we discussed a grant application that the city was preparing to submit under DOT, and that application at the time was essentially to explore a feasibility study at this letter of entry. You all were the first ones to get that update even before our city council saw it the following week. And because of the timeline and the deadline that we had for May 23rd, we were working in parallel, right? The letters of support and the grant application. And at the same time, we're also discussing the project and the city pursuing this funding with GSA and CBP leadership, both here in El Paso and out of town in Fort Worth and other cities. During that time, before we hit submit and we send the application, during that time, we had numerous meetings with GSA and CBP, and in discussions with them, we actually decided to expand the scope, expand the budget, and not only look at Isleta, but look at the entire bridge system for El Paso, all the way from Santa Teresa to Tornillo and everything in between. And so with those discussions, the application evolved. Like I said, it expanded in scope, it expanded in budget. And so we ended up with now what is a needs assessment for the El Paso International Bridge System. And so in the needs assessment, the application elements now came out to $5 million in total. The city would come in with a $2 million match, essentially a 40% match, and then 60% by the feds, $3 million in total. So that was the expansion in the budget. And then this is a very short list of the elements of the application. Where we're looking at the entire system-wide existing conditions, travel patterns, origin destination for all the ports of entry, master planning and conceptual redesigns for all the ports of entry, looking at freight industry dynamics, like I said, origin destination, working with maquiladoras, with the transportistas, logistics companies to understand what's happening and the patterns over time as traffic moves between Santa Teresa, Isleta, Bora, and now Tornillo coming online with the new libramiento on the Mexican side. And so essentially, over the last month or so, we adjusted the scope. This is now where we ended up. We submitted on May 23rd. The City Council did get a chance to review the expanded scope, but because of the timing, we're now back with you all today to essentially request your support with a new letter, a revised letter that essentially addresses the new elements and replaces the one that you approved last month. This is essentially what it is. It's a repeat item that now allows you to hopefully support the city with a revised letter that allows Eduardo to sign it. And then we will, if approved, we will send it to DOT as an addendum to the application that we submitted on May 23rd, just a few weeks ago. So that's the item, pretty brief, just an updated letter that we're requesting that Eduardo will be allowed to sign and provide to the city for the backup of the application. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you all.
Mr. Coronado, anybody have any questions? Mr. Rivera?
No questions. I'll make the motion to approve.
I have a motion and a second to approve the signing of the letter of support. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The motion does carry.
All right, so moving to item number 7. Consider authorizing the executive director to execute task order number 5 with Texas Transportation Institute, TTI, for assistance with preparation and submission of a grant application for Safe Streets and Roads for All, SS4A, grant program for development of a safety action plan. So on this one, as you've heard for several months already, we've been very involved with at the state level with the safety task force, and really, getting a lot more awareness on the issues that we have on our roadways with fatalities and serious injuries. So the idea of developing a safety action plan that is truly regional, we've been discussing that. However, when the Safe Streets and Roads for All federal program came out, which is one of the programs under the new infrastructure bill, the way that we read that notice of funding opportunity, the NOFO, it's very clear that MPOs are really, the ones that should be developing these regional plans. So the combination of having, thought of this initially and now seeing this funding opportunity, I think it is a great opportunity for us to do that. So as we all know, these federal programs are very competitive. There's a lot of money out there, but they're still very competitive. So we need to write very good, solid applications in order to be competitive. So the purpose of this task order, and given that TTI is really one of the leaders in analyzing safety and all that, we feel very comfortable with having them help us prepare the application. So they'd be taking the lead, preparing the application and submitting it to meet the deadline of September 15th. So the scope of work of the task order is very simple: is prepare the application, right? And we are looking for approval for $30,000, not to exceed $30,000. That would be the budget. And we just received the last version of the scope of work last night. So we feel very comfortable that with $30K we can prepare a very good application.
Do you have an idea what the funding request is going to be?
Not yet. We know that the program, the SS4A has 2 buckets. The first bucket is to prepare action plans. The second bucket is if you already have a safety action plan, then you can request funding for specific projects, programs coming from your safety plan. So for the bucket that we're looking at, the awards are anywhere between $200,000 and $5 million. Obviously, we're not, $5 million is too much, and because there's also the question of the local match that we still need to figure out, but we've got some pretty good ideas on how to do that. So the amount of the that we're requesting for the award to develop the plan will be within that range. Obviously, it's a very wide range, but I can't tell you exactly what it is until we develop that application. And we'll definitely come back, obviously, to inform the board as we move forward.
So move. Motion to approve the authorization for the executive director to execute the task order plan.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried.
Mr. Chair, one more thing that is also very important. When you read the notice, and we've also participated in some of these webinars, what is very important, and it's one of the criteria that the USDOT will be looking for evaluating these proposals, is the commitment, the local commitment to not just to develop the plan, but also to execute whatever comes out of the plan. So I think our application will be very, very strong if we have letters of support and letters of some sort of a commitment from all of everybody here within the region. So clearly the MPO, if we're going to be the sponsors, we would need a resolution from the policy board. But I think it would be a lot better and stronger if we have individual resolutions from the cities, the municipalities, the county, the DOTs. And of course, this covers not just Texas, it covers New Mexico as well. So I'm looking at Mayor Perea and Trent. You know, we're going to be asking for your help as well as we develop the application, and certainly, you know, support.
Should we get this plan initiated, would any project funding that comes in, would it be managed by the individual entity, or would it be managed by the MPO?
The award to develop the action plan would probably be managed by the MPO, because, you know, we would be the sponsor, so we would be managing that. So the MPO would be entering into an agreement with USDOT.
But any project resulting from that plan would be initiated by the individual entity?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it all depends if it's a specific, if it's a construction project, for example, to, you know, whatever it is, you know, a rail grade separation or something, yeah, it would follow the same process. But it could be a program, a region-wide program that, again, could be managed by the MPO as well. I mean, there's a lot of options there, but that's for the implementation phase.
Any further on that one? Okay, we can go to item number 8.
All right, so item number 8, consider adoption of an in-person attendance policy for Transportation Policy Board and Transportation Project Advisory Committee members. Mr. Chair.
Okay, as you all can see today, we have an issue with quorum at this meeting. And thank you, Representative Ordaz, for getting here, or we would not have this meeting today. And what we are proposing here, in order to make it easier for us to be able to meet the needs of our members, because all of these things are time sensitive, we need to have a meeting. And because we have struggled all year to meet that, what we are proposing is to discontinue participation by our member. To be counted as present, you need to be here. That's what I'm asking, and that's what's on the agenda today. And we're here to discuss and see what we can do. So, opening the discussion.
Just, there's some organizations that are taking advantage of learning how to do that for emergency purposes, that you have some.
It's okay, sir.
I don't know if we would be in, maybe just allowing one or two, whatever. We could do it through video, just so that we could have.
The issue, I don't have any issue with the video participation, except that we can't count them for quorum. And if it's available, then, and you can see, we are at the limit today. We're often at the limit. If we allow that participation, if we offer the availability, then we have to count those members present by Open Meetings Act. Is that correct? That's correct. That is correct. And so our only remedy to that is not to offer the participation virtually.
Mr. Chair,
In order to be counted present, you need to be here in person.
what was the county judge's recommendation? I couldn't hear him over here. What did the county judge recommend? We couldn't hear him over.
I have a couple about,
What I was saying that you'd be allowed at least one or two for emergency. I know like with the legislators sometimes that it's difficult for them and they still want to participate, but you don't want to count them as absent. But just allow one or two per kind of thing, and that would limit that. I mean, I think we've learned so much about how effective it is to be able to have people that are doing something else and yet participate. And so I don't know of anyone going strictly back into person. So.
And, there are, I did a poll of the various boards around, and maybe half or more have also already done this because they're struggling the same with totally limiting that. And it's just a question of quorum. It's a great way to participate, but because we have that restriction that you have to be here in person to make quorum, then we're struggling to have these meetings. And that's why we are forced to, this is the only remedy that we could find.
Sure. Should the board accept the recommendation that the judge has made today in allowing a second individual from each representing entity here? Would there have to be qualifications of some sort from that individual who's going to come in? Because
I'm sorry.
When I say qualification, I don't mean I'm not going to send my mom to stand in
You're
for
talking about
an alternate. An alternate. Is that what
you were talking about? An alternate.
No, I was just saying, not an alternate, but I think that we've learned so well how to do that. And the other thing is, we're not out of COVID yet. And if we don't keep that process going and the ability to video and have people out there, I mean, it could change on us pretty quickly, but at least we have the system prepared to be able to do that. But that's why maybe just one or whatever.
The bylaws would need to change.
Let me clarify that. I'm not proposing that we discontinue use of video for presentations, for participation by the public. I think we should still stream it. We should accept commentary from non-members virtually. Our only objective here is to protect our quorum. And should we not have had Ms. Ordaz come today, we would not have been able to act on these time-sensitive matters. And we were considering calling another meeting for next week. We're in a corner here that because of the Open Meetings Act, you have to have an in-person quorum to have a meeting. And
so the fact that you get gain for not participating is not sufficient. I mean, because I don't understand why someone.
Okay, if we offer, under the Open Meetings Act, if we offer video conferencing, then those members are considered present. So we have to discontinue, in order to achieve where we need to be, we have to discontinue the video participation completely. Is that correct?
That's correct, but let me clarify that. What is being proposed, and from the legal perspective and how it was reviewed was, can this body adopt a policy that requires in-person attendance at the meeting, knowing that there are provisions in the Open Meetings Act that allow for video participation? And the reason that was looked into is because there has been a concern with making quorum in most of our meetings. And so you all decide how you want to address that issue. And what is before you is an attendance policy that would be applicable only to TPB members and perhaps even members of the TPAC. And so, we're not speaking about members of the public. We're not speaking about staff members or presenters. We're only talking about members of the board. And the provisions of the Open Meetings Act make participation by video an option that the body may decide to avail itself of, but does not make it a requirement. So by adopting this policy, what you're doing is you're saying, if you want to be present, counted present at the meeting, you must appear in person. That's the only thing that is the only real thing that's being changed at all. I will add one single thing. When drafting or when helping to draft this attendance policy, it is a fact that you are locked in. If you adopt the policy, you are locked into in-person attendance. And as a side note, Chair, I did have a note there that maybe we would want the body to consider where the chair could decide, whether or not the policy could be suspended, so that whoever the chair is, you now and in the future, whoever the chair is, in case an emergency arises, you could have in the policy the right to suspend the rule, and it would be at the chair's discretion, and that gives you some flexibility.
And that would allow for, should there be a governor's declaration, we wouldn't have to have a meeting to
amend the policy. Correct.
Suspend the.
I got a question.
Wait, excuse me, Mr. Rivera.
There's a question. How many do we have off today?
16. How many, there are 16 here, so there are 14 people that are not, and I think we have 4 on video. 4 on video.
6 on video.
6 on video.
6. So I was thinking maybe you could limit the number of people that can apply, give an advance notice that they will be on virtually.
Or you're going to choose the ones that can do that.
Yeah, I know.
First come, first served.
I mean, that's the way it works. They have a policy where we notify them ahead of time that we could be off.
And that was the original intent of the ability to prior to COVID, prior to that, in the Open Meeting Act, that was the original intent, was to let, in specific circumstances, participation by a board member in a special instance. We've taken that a little further than that now. So, Commissioner,
and I see your concern.
No, I agree with the rationale behind the policy, because I don't think it's fair, especially for the members who are traveling from far away. I mean, if I get here and all of a sudden we have to cancel because there's no quorum, I just go 2 blocks to the courthouse. So it's not too much of anything. But our mayor from San Eli, the mayors from New Mexico, I think it's a huge inconvenience to them to get here only to find out there's no quorum. So I do agree with the rationale of the policy, and I'm in favor of the change. However, I do just want to make a comment that I think if we do that, we're going to have to seriously start looking at another space, because now we're going to have a lot more people who are present. So I think we're going to have to go back to having that discussion about appropriate space for the meetings. But I would be in favor of the policy change.
I just wanted to ask Sergio, right now, the way the resolution is worded, you suggested in response to our county judge that there could be a provision in the resolution that says if for safety, health reasons, emergency reasons, or whatever, that the chair could actually say, all right, we will go back for the next meeting and for the next few months to the way we are currently, but would we have to add that now to that resolution in order to get it adopted?
If you want to adopt the policy today, I think the motion would have to be, to include the provision where the chair, the presiding chair, is granted the authority or the discretion to suspend the policy. And, I think that's broad enough to where, we would assume that whoever our presiding chair is would use his discretion reasonably, and that the policy isn't being suspended at all times. But that would be enough. Or if you wanted to be more specific, we could say, could suspend the policy when matters of health and safety are, of concern. And I think that would be good, because you're not, as a body, you're not locked in, and situations are always changing. It's a policy of the board. You must be present unless the presiding chair suspends the policy.
And so we can do that regardless of whether or not the governor has entered an executive order. That can be consistent with the Open Meetings Act.
Right. This entire policy is drafted, and that additional provision that we're discussing would all be consistent with TOMA as it applies now to us. And there's also, at the end of the policy, I put something in there that if there is ever an executive order like the ones we were operating under during COVID that said you must, or I don't know if it said you must, but certainly gave all governmental entities the authority to do all business via Zoom, that those provisions automatically preempt our policy so that we are never in conflict with an executive order or a law.
Then my last question is, if this resolution is passed with that additional provision being placed in the resolution, then can we still allow, should a policy board member choose that they want to access the meeting online and indicate that they're present, that they can do that, but they will not be counted as physically being present? Now, if that's the case, we do have in our rules, when there are reasons where members are excused and they have a certain number of meetings that they could be excused from without using their right to vote. Or as the county judge pointed out, we sometimes as lawmakers have to be during session. I know by law that we are excused for meetings because of that. But there are provisions that allow members to actually be excused in a certain number of meetings, correct? Before he goes against it.
I don't believe we have any excused absences per se, but we do have an allowance for three absences in a year. So, but I don't believe that we have a provision for an excused absence.
I don't have the attendance policy in front of me, but there are provisions that allow for absences that don't count against you, right? I mean, we did that recently, 2019, I think, when we amended some of the bylaws.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so that's what I was going to say, that this resolution or this policy clearly states that the attendance policy established in the bylaws does not change, right? So the only thing that, and the policy also allows for, excused absences and all that. It's when it was amended, it was very generous in terms of some excused absences, especially for the state delegation during the session and all that. So that doesn't change. The only thing that changes here is that if you do not attend in person, then it does count as an absence, right? The bylaw state, gives you a break. You don't lose your voting rights just because you're absent once. Of course not. Whatever the bylaw state remains in place. But the only thing that we're changing here is that you need to be, in order for you to count as present, you have to be in person.
Representative Lasada's got her hand up.
Yeah, I was going to you have a comment?
No, that's the other one.
Okay. Representative Lasada.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Sorry, gosh, there's so much echoing in here. Oh, I apologize. My question, for city council members, we are allowed 2 members to attend virtually. And so we have to request that ahead of time. I'm just wondering if we can put something in this, amend it somehow so that, how many members need to be present for a quorum?
16.
I'm just throwing that out, something to allow maybe 2 members or 4 members to be, to allow virtually and then cut it off. So first come, first serve, something like that we allow for our city council members?
Based on our attendance, that's not going to help us much. That's still allowing 4 people not to be here to be counted for quorum. And so I understand what you would like to have us do there, but it doesn't help our problem much here because it still allows for 4 people not to be here. So, Mayor.
Can we, and I understand what you're saying, and I'm not in disagreement, but the only thing that I think makes it really tough for us for a quorum is when the state representatives and the state senator are in session. During that time, can we not count them as needed for a quorum? Make some kind of provision, because there's 5 of them that really during session cannot be here.
And I think by law, we can't
That's what I was wondering, is there any way of doing that where we could go bylaw that says those 5 will not count during session because they can't be here? So I'm not quite sure why we'd want to count them.
In other words, they wouldn't go into our quorum count.
During session only.
I don't know that we
Is
can.
there a way of doing that?
Well, the law says that a majority of the board, right? So, and there's no way to back off from that requirement. So a majority of the board is what constitutes quorum. And I don't think that's in the state statute. So if what you're saying is, can we come up with a policy that says the state representatives, while in attending the legislative session, don't count towards quorum, I think that may conflict with the rule that says that, a majority of the body is what constitutes a quorum. I think what we've done in terms of our bylaws to accommodate them, and it is, I think, also a requirement of the law, and that's probably why it's in our bylaws, because I've looked at it before, is that they not be counted absent, that they not be penalized, right, in attendance here when they're in Austin doing their legislative duties. So that's what we've done. I don't think we can do exactly what you're proposing, because then we're kind of carving out a members of our body and saying you don't count for a quorum, but that doesn't align with state law. I do think, however,
we're not counting them absent either. I'm saying, so you do have a provision already in the bylaws that say they're not counted absent. So if they're not counted absent, then they shouldn't be counted towards the quorum. I mean, I think we ought to be able to research that and look it up. I mean, we're assuming right now you can't, but there may be something that allows us to do that, because I think we can't require them to be here when they're required to be in session.
Right. So very quickly, yes, we can look into it and certainly try and see if there's a way to accommodate that. Secondly, though, I think this kind of supports the justification for the provision in the attendance policy that the chair of the board can suspend the policy when when there's a reasonable justification for it. And maybe when the state reps are in Austin, that may be one of the circumstances where you suspend the rule and they can all appear by video. And again, that doesn't go to quorum because the rule is that they have to be present, but it allows for their participation and vote and counted present.
Mayor, I believe Mayor Murillo has her hand raised. Mayor
Yes.
Murillo?
Yes, I'm kind of, sometimes I call Marisol, like the day of the meeting, I have an emergency with my disability and stuff, and I can't make it. And I just don't want it to be taken away virtually, because at the last minute emergency, I want to be there at the meeting. I look at the notes, I review the documents, and I want to be part of this. So to think about people with disabilities as well that cannot make it, and because of space availability there in downtown, it's really hard to get handicap accessibility parking. And sometimes now that we have this new location, it's a little bit harder. So I mean, to think about that, I ask. Thank you.
Mr. Sanchez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand, I think, legal counsel's advice by saying when you can suspend this law or suspend the rules, but it doesn't, suspending the rules doesn't seem to address the issue at hand, which is making quorum in person. So I didn't know if there's any opportunity that you could look at amending the bylaws such that we, within our different entities, could have authorized members that could attend for us. In a case like for myself, where I have to travel to Albuquerque or Santa Fe, or maybe one of us is on vacation, if there was an authorized backfill that could attend in person, representing, like in this case, Doña Ana County, that might be able to address some of those issues where if I can't attend in person, but I'm attending remotely today, but I could have the county manager attend, then that person could count towards quorum. And that might alleviate some of those issues of achieving quorum. I don't know, like I said, if there's anything in the bylaws that would allow us to do that.
Okay, to address that, what we're doing today is an immediate thing because we have an immediate issue. That, what you're discussing is a bylaws change that considers either an alternative or a proxy. We are in the midst of a bylaws review, and certainly since you brought it up, we can certainly bring that into our discussions. Or I think it should be a subject to discuss. I've heard Mr. Cruz brought that up also. We're willing to discuss that. We have had similar discussions with the members of TPAC regarding that issue, whether an alternative member could suffice. That's not apropos to this discussion, but it's certainly something that we will take under advisement. I think it can go on our agenda. We are working on some bylaw changes. We should be bringing them to you shortly with that. And on that note, if you have bylaw changes that you, just like this, to consider, we would be glad to do that. But that's kind of a different issue than what we're talking about today.
I understand, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to bring that up because I think the ability to still attend virtually is good, but I understand the concern where you want to ensure that people there are in person. So was just trying to, it seems like this is not maybe the direct solution. I'm in support either way because I understand, and I also understand with respect to Mayor Murillo's request, and I think we should, hopefully the board will take that into account. But I think like that, I don't know that this change would, I think, get us to where you're trying to go, and I understand like the concerns. So that's the only reason I bring it up. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. This is a great opportunity just to express another concern that I've had as legal counsel for the board. Regardless of how the board decides to proceed, whether they adopt the policy or not adopt the policy, whenever we do have meetings by video conference, under TOMA, it specifically required that the body have the required technology to conduct the meeting virtually, and that requires that members of the body who are appearing remotely must be visible when they speak. It must be audible to everyone in the room. And there's been times in the past where I don't see that there's been full compliance with those requirements. So, this is just an opportunity for me to remind you all that if you do decide to keep remote attendance as an option, that it is a responsibility of the members that they are able to comply with those requirements, from wherever it is that they're going to appear, that when they participate in the meeting, that their videos be on, that people here be able to hear them, because that is a requirement. So that's another thing that you need to consider.
Mr. Chair, can I just add a couple of things? In addition or in parallel to this policy, there are things that we also need to consider, right? Because of course the concern is quorum, right? Right now, what we're really concerned is quorum. So we also need to look at those that are chronically absent. There are some board members that have never shown up, and we need to figure out why, and or what to do about that, right? I mean, if they're not interested in participating, could we change maybe the composition of the board, right? That's one thing that to consider. The second thing is that I'll speak for myself. For some of the local governments that are not participating, we need to go out there and encourage them to participate. Very specifically, from Clint, we haven't had participation in a long time. The same for Anthony, Texas. Why is it? I'm very excited to see the mayor of Sanelli now, and hopefully, we can have participation there consistent, because that was not happening in the past. So that's another thing that we need to look at. Maybe the composition of the board, and for those that are chronically absent, maybe that's something else that needs to be looked at. And then secondly, to your point, Commissioner Olkin, yeah, we are looking at the other opportunities. We want to make it as easy as possible for people to come in, and I truly take to heart Mayor Murillo's request on that. I know this is one of the shortcomings of this facility, parking in general terms. So we are looking at, we continue looking for other options as well, and for the MPO office, right? Remember that the lease that we signed was only for 24 months, but we need to look at other opportunities as well for offices, but certainly to hold the other TPB meetings.
So that being said, I would entertain a motion to accept this change in policy.
I'll make that motion, adding the provision that the chair has that discretion to suspend the policy.
Second.
Have a motion and a second.
Just one question. In relation to suspending the rules, is it restrictive, legal counsel, is it restrictive only in these cases in a matter of, in cases of a declaration of emergency, or does the chair have the ability to be as flexible as possible, in order to conduct business, that he can suspend those rules, he or she can suspend those rules at any time?
I think in the manner in which the motion was made, it's like the discretion resides solely with the chair, and no restrictions were added to that language, so it would allow him or her maximum flexibility.
Okay. That was the intent.
Okay, I agree. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hear no opposition, so that motion carries. Thank you for that.
All right, so now we move to reports and discussion. Item number 9 is a timeline for the second performance period report for CMAQ, traffic congestion and on-road mobile source emissions targets. And Sonia Perez from MPO staff will present.
Permission.
Should I ask the board if you can go? I'm sorry.
Good morning, Chair and members of the board. Sonia Perez, Transportation Planner with the El Paso MPO. This item is a report on the National Performance Measures, second performance period for target setting and reporting. The El Paso MPO is required to set targets for 3 CMAQ-related performance measures to assess traffic congestion and on-road mobile source emissions. This is the first time the MPO will be reporting on 2 traffic congestion performance measures. These are the peak hour excessive delay, PHED, usually called PHED measure, and the percent of non-single occupancy vehicle, non-SOV, travel measure. The PHED measure is the annual hours of peak hour excessive delay per capita that occurs within an applicable urbanized area. The percent of non-SOV travel measure is the percentage of non-single occupancy vehicles traveling within an applicable urbanized area. For the on-road mobile source emission measures, this is the second time we'll be reporting, and it's the total emissions reduction measure, represents the 2- and 4-year cumulative estimated emissions reductions for all CMAQ-funded projects of each applicable criteria pollutant and precursors for which the area is in non-attainment or maintenance. For this performance period, the El Paso MPO is required to set targets for PM10, carbon monoxide, and the ozone precursors. Specific to New Mexico, the MPO needs to set targets for ozone and PM10, and for Texas, PM10 and CO only, since the rules were, or the applicability tables were determined before the non-attainment set of the County of El Paso, the non-attainment definition. So for this performance period, it will be only PM10 and CO, but for the next performance period in 2026, we will have to also report on ozone. El Paso MPO staff has developed a timeline to meet the deadline for the target setting and reporting. If you can go to the timeline, yes, the timeline includes a 15-day public participation review and one public meeting scheduled for July 14th. The recommended targets will be presented at the public meeting and available for review during the 15-day public participation starting July 8th and ending on 22nd. We will come back for TPB approval on August 19th to be able to send or submit by the deadline September 1st so that the states can review and then they can report by October 1st. This concludes my presentation. I can answer any questions you may have.
Before anybody asks a question, we have lost our quorum, and so I think we cannot have discussion. Is that correct?
You know, that's since we're in the report section of I think if you don't have a quorum, you can continue to listen to the presentations. You may have some limited discussion, but you can't take any action. So
anyway, all right.
So, Mr. Chair, just to add what Sonia just mentioned, I mean, this is all very important. It's part of the process that we need to follow. The whole thing about performance-based planning and programming that is part of has been part of the federal process. So it may sound a little bit technical, but it's important for the board to know about this, and especially like Sonia said, the board has to officially adopt these, all these performance measures. And because again, it's part of the process, and we need to make sure that we follow it and stay on top of them.
Thank you, Mr. Cabo. I think you can ask a question.
What are the targets? Do you know what you're going to recommend?
We're in discussion with the states, and we will be presenting, as I mentioned, the targets, or we will have them available when the 15-day performance period starts. We still haven't set them. We don't have them yet, but they will be available.
For like 3 weeks?
Yes.
Can you?
Yes, they
do the air monitoring, so I'd like to know what the targets are.
We will make them available at our webpage, and we'll be sending them also to all the members. If we can, we're gonna have them presented at TPAC, but we don't have them yet.
All right, so moving on then to item number 10, the status update on the Pelicano Drive roadway improvement project from the county, and we have Jose Landeros and Sal Alonso. Well, I don't know if Jose is going to start it.
Good morning, Chair, Board Member Sal Alonso, Associate Director of Planning Development for El Paso County and the current project manager for the construction of the Pelicano widening project. I'm here today to present just an update on the status of the project. As you know, this is a major project for the county that's been under construction. So if we could go ahead and get to the next slide, please. Just to give you a little background on the project, this project is, the team is made up of the county with the partnership with the Camino Real Regional Mobility. The design group is CEA, construction management is by our GEC, Atkins, and construction contractor is Jark Concrete. The total amount of this project was estimated about $22 million. This project was funded through MPO funds, and the county is participated in using some local funds for the design. Just to give you a quick scope of work, this project is a 3-mile stretch between Loop 375 and Darrington. The couple of items that were, some of the improvements include a bike lane, share use path, sidewalks, continuous illumination, drainage infrastructure, which was really needed in this area because of there was no outlet for any storms water. So every time when we would get heavy rains, we would have to have our crews and even TxDOT crews to help us pump water. So with these improvements, it will help mitigate all our stormwater runoff that had been collected in these areas. Also, to include some landscaping, it is a 6 lanes divided roadway with improvements on both sides and, of course, illumination. Just to highlight some of the current delays that we've had in this project, COVID-19, I do want to stress that anytime we hear COVID-19, I know it seems like it's like a default if projects are behind, but I do want to stress that the COVID-19 item here was not our current situation, but back about a year ago to a little bit further beyond that was when COVID was at its worst, pretty much. The lack of progress really hurt us. So if I could give an example, if we were to do 2 miles worth of improvements and we were only able to do 1 mile, then we're still 1 mile behind. So that I just want to stress that the COVID-19 we're still feeling the effects of that because of the shortage of materials. The laborers has been key. I can't speak for all projects, but in the conversations that I had with other agencies, material and of course the labor shortages is still ongoing. But hopefully we do pick up the laborers coming back, so that's one key item. The other delays were unforeseen utility conflicts. As you know what's on the design on plans and what is out there is usually 2 different things, especially when you start trenching and digging up. Our designers always use the best available data at the time of the design, and sometimes it's not until you start excavating as you're preparing to install storm sewer, water, or whatever it may be, you run into several utility conflicts. And we have had several of those in this stretch, vertical and horizontal. So that makes our job a little bit difficult because now we have to go back and redesign it on the fly. With the coordination with TechStat and of course our consultants, just because if we're proposing to do lateral and some of these elevations, we have to hit on the mark because of the slope, and if we don't hit the slope, then that creates several problems for us. So we've seen a lot of utility conflicts in this corridor. Again, any possible future delays, cement availability is something that is now present here locally. It's not all work is going to come to a halt, but hopefully we're not there, but there is a shortage on cement. The availability is there, but we might not be able to secure that much cement as we move forward. Again, the other thing is, again, utilities. We're still working under some areas that we haven't even started, which is basically phase 4, which we're hoping we don't have that situation there, but again, it could be a possibility of unforeseen utility conflicts. And then, as previously mentioned, again, some material availabilities. Across the board, materials have been shortage. We do have some materials that have been ordered, but they're on delay. And typically something that could be delivered within a couple of days, a couple of weeks, could be now several weeks. So those are just items I wanted to point out as a possible future delays. Next slide, please. This exhibit here just kind of gives you like a little timeline on our target dates. The area in yellow, which is the eastbound between Loop 375 and Air Coupe, is complete. We're currently working on the segment that is red between Loop 375 and Air Coupe, and you have some target dates that we're really pushing to hit those dates. The goal right now is to get all main lanes constructed and built. That way we could open the traffic up, and then we'll be working on the parkway improvements after that. But as you can see right here, these are the target dates. We're currently working within the red portion and the purple portion as we speak, which is the westbound lanes, pretty much from Loop 375 all the way to Darrington. The segment in blue, which is the eastbound Air Coupe, that is what we consider our phase 4, which we're still not there yet. But right now we're focusing on the red and purple areas. Next slide, please. This is just a kind of like a forecast for the upcoming weeks. We presented this presentation to Commissioner's Court a couple weeks ago. and now we're presenting to the board. We're going around the affected areas just to give them just an update on the overall project. But some areas that or some forecast activities that we're working on is the Joe Battle to Sunfire. We were working on finalizing the embankment, installation of the water laterals, and some flex base. As of today, we actually are working on the flex base as we speak today. So that's really big, because after that, we'll be able to start working on the bond breaker, lay rebar, and then start with the concrete work. The Sunfire to air coop, the installation of concrete, that started back at the end of May. That portion has been completed. The first pass, which is a 24-foot wide section, and that was completed about a week and a half ago. Right now, we are working on the air coop to Darrington, finalizing some water loops that was also completed last week. We're also working on the embankment, working on the installation of some utility laterals that we're partnering up with the El Paso Water Utilities, and then again, some perimeter walls constructed. Next slide, please. So one of the things that the county wanted to do is be more proactive and go out for the public outreach. So we have started I'm calling it the 2022 Pelicano Widening Tour. This is the third stop on the tour. We've met already with the CRMA board last week, and Commissioners Court also. Today I'm here presenting in front of the MPO board. I will be back here on July 6th to address the TPAC, and then I believe July 12th we're scheduled to present a presentation at the City of Horizon, and we're still trying to coordinate the board meeting for the SISD. And all we're trying to do is provide them an update on where the project is at, the activities that have been completed, to show that we're moving forward with the project. As of today, from the time that we present to Commissioner's Court, we have had more progress as the presentation has shown. So this is obviously an old presentation, but as we're moving forward, we'll be making updates to the presentation. We're also going to be utilizing social media internally with the county. We also have our partners with the CRMA that's going to help us spread the word and just give the public an update. This is a high-profile road. If you may know, if you live in the area, there's a lot of traffic in this area. It's just unbelievable. I'm there. I'm on the boots in the ground, and I do see that firsthand. So I understand the importance on trying to get this wrapped up and all lanes open to the public as soon as possible. Next slide, please. Again, this is just some pictures that we've taken. I guess this is a very old picture that was taken in May. That's when we were starting with the embankment in this area, but this is the area that we're actually now working on the flex space. Next slide, please. Again, this is when we started laying the concrete, the 20-foot pass between Sunfire and Mission Ridge. We also completed that as well. We are doing midnight pours, and for the reason is it's been very hot, as you know. So we're starting usually about 7, 8 o'clock at night, and our contractor goes all the way through probably like 9, 10 in the morning. You'll see them out there, but you won't see this activity during the day just because it's just too hot. And when you're dealing with concrete, you don't have that much time. Next slide, please. Again, here's just another portion that we've also completed, and this was a segment right in front of the Speedway as we're tying into Loop 375. This was a very crucial portion because we were trying to finish out the right lane. That way we could get out of the intersection of Pelicano and Loop 375. At times, again, for folks that are in this area, we have bottlenecked to one lane, so I know it makes it difficult for traffic to come in and out. So this is where we're trying to target this to get this opened up to traffic. That way we have a designated right turn lane and a through lane on this area. But this middle section was completed also, I believe it was last week. Next slide, please. Again, this is just some examples of just ongoing activity, some water loops that we installed. Next slide, please. Again, this is just a relief route that we installed just to relieve some of the traffic that had been created by Pelicano. So this was just a coordination with the City of El Paso with their portion. So we had just had to make some minor modifications to the relief route to be able to keep this temporary road in place to help relieve some traffic in the area. Next slide, please. Again, this is just activity, some riprap that we were installing at the time, which is complete now. Next slide, please. And with that, that concludes my presentation for the Pelicano Widening. I'll be happy to have answer any questions that anybody may have at this time.
All I can say is hurry.
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you again. I appreciate the time and allow me to present this project in front of the board. So thank you very much. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, the idea for bringing this project is really to make sure that the board is aware of all the projects that are funded with through the MPO. This is a $25 million project that was funded with combination of CBI in Category 7 and I think CMAQ, right, Category 5. So it's a substantial amount, 25 million. And it's important, I think, for the board to know, how projects are moving forward, because a lot of you have, constituents that may be asking you questions about this. So, we focus more on the project development phase. And, once projects go to construction, we forget about it and, that's someone else's problem. Well, no, it's still our responsibility to make sure that projects are done, in time or, at least to be informed. So thank you for the county for presenting this one. And we're also going to be asking, the other partners, the city and others that have construction projects going on right now that are funded through the MPO. So you'll see these reports more and more. All right. We're going to move on then to the item number 11, which is El Paso MPO Federal Transit Administration, 5310, request for proposals for fiscal years 2023, 2024, and Jeff Howell will have a short presentation.
Good morning, Chair and TPB members. Jeff Howell with the MPO. Item 11 on the agenda is just an announcement for the upcoming El Paso MPO FTA 5310 request for proposals for fiscal years 2023 and 2024. We anticipate an announcement for the call for projects for the Federal Transit Administration Section 5310 program funds for the El Paso urbanized area to be released on July 5th, 2022. This program provides formula funding to increase the mobility of seniors and individuals with disabilities. The amount of federal fiscal year 2022, or FFY 2022, allocated funds are $884,758 to be programmed in FY23, while the FFY 2023 estimated funds of $884,758 are to be programmed in FY 2024. Public notice will be published in the El Paso Times, in the El Paso EMAS newspapers, and on the El Paso MPO's website. All project call information related to the RFP, to include the application and supplemental materials, will be posted on the El Paso MPO website. The project call will close on September 23rd, 2022 at 3 p.m. MDT. A draft of the announcement and the overall timeline can be found as part of the backup for this item. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions regarding this call for project? Thank you very much.
All right, so moving on to item number 12 is the monthly RMS 2020 project status report, and Gabby Lopez from MPO will provide a short presentation.
Good morning, Gabriela Lopez with the El Paso MPO. This is the monthly report on the RMS 2020 projects. This has been updated to reflect the latest information received from the entities through the project readiness report. However, there is one change that will be reflected based on the 30% review from Sean Haggerty that was provided at yesterday's TxDOT district design review meeting. So that will be reflected in the next TPAC and TPD meetings. And just as a reminder, we will be reaching out soon to coordinate one-on-one meetings with all the entities to better track the development of the RMS 2020 projects. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair, one thing that I really would like to highlight is for the Borderland Expressway, or the Northeast Parkway, that TxDOT held the public meeting, well, the public hearing actually last week, which is a big step towards the approval of the environmental document. So kudos for that. And again, it ties to the item that was approved earlier today with New Mexico 213 with New Mexico DOT. So that project is again, one of the priority projects that this board has identified. And it's good to see that that's a major milestone that was taken on the text outside.
Any comments or questions? Okay, you next go to the next item.
All right, item number 13 is the upcoming notices of funding opportunity, NOFOs, for federal grant programs. And this is just a very brief item to give all of you the opportunity to look at all the programs that are available out there as part of the new infrastructure bill. There is one link that we provided as well that takes you to a USDOT webpage that has information for all these projects. Again, the intent is as we move forward and more information is known about all of these individual projects for the MPO to help all of us try to match, whatever projects are available with the best programs, and do it in a strategic way so that we're not jumping or competing against each other's at a regional level. So again, I don't want to take a lot of time on that, but there is a lot of information out there. There's been a lot of presentations by TxDOT, New Mexico DOT, and others that have provide a lot of information, what is known about many of these programs. There is still a lot of information that is not known for some of the programs that are yet to come out. Well, one thing that I do want to mention as part of all this opportunity focuses on rail at-grade intersections. And this is something that again, it has a lot to do with safety as well. And one thing that we found out relatively, a couple of months ago, is that TxDOT conducted a statewide study of all at-grade intersections, statewide, except for the 4 major metropolitan areas, because those had already their own studies. So, but for the rest of the state, through a analysis process and evaluation and all that, they identified the top 20 candidate at-grade intersections for, to get them grade separated, right? Which means, figure out a way so that we're not having conflicts every time a train, moves across. And 4 of those of the top 20 are in El Paso. So that's really, really good news in the sense that at the state level, we have already 4 of the top, priority projects. And those are Zaragoza Road, North Piedras, Copia, within the limits of the city of El Paso, and Moon Road in Socorro. So again, having this is, to me, I think it's really good news. It makes any future application for funding, whether it's for the Safe Streets for All or for some other specific programs that address a grade separation project. So, we'll be on the lookout and we'll be working with all of you to see if and when we can take advantage of those opportunities. So with that, that's all I have on this item. If you have any questions or thoughts.
So does that mean we're going to get money?
Well, we need to apply for it. But again, the fact that these 4 projects are already identified in a very serious statewide study, that counts. I think that's very important. All right, let's move on then to item 14, the statewide TxDOT Safety Task Force. I don't have a lot to report here because this committee did not meet last month. It was canceled, even though we're already there in Austin. But again, it's just to highlight the emphasis that the commission, the Texas Transportation Commission, is putting on safety and tied to item number 5 as well. So if you have any questions on that, let me know, or thoughts. And then finally, the executive director's report. There's a couple of things that I wanted to mention. First of all, we were notified a couple of weeks ago by the Federal Highway Administration and the Federal Transit Administration that they will be conducting the 4-year federal certification review of the MPO, which is a lot of fun. If you all remember, 4 years ago. The last one was conducted in 2018. So, we were expecting it to happen this year. So if you recall the certification review, the Federal Highway and FTA and others as well, take a look at the overall process on how all of us are conducting that. Of course, the MPO takes the lead on many of those things, but Sun Metro has a lot to that, participation in that as well. So the first step is for us to gather all of the documentation so that they can initiate a desktop review of all the documents. So actually today we're going to be submitting the first round of documents. They'll take a look. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of back and forth. But then the actual in-person or on-site discussions are scheduled for August, I believe, 17th and 18th, or 18th, 17th and 18th, right? And so that's when folks from the Federal Highway Administration and FTA will be physically here conducting one-on-one interviews with many of the stakeholders. So many of you may be called in, board members, other elected officials, and other stakeholders. Hopefully somebody also as well, they involve the private sector and others as well. And so after that, they will evaluate all the things that the MPO and all of us collectively have done here and certify that we have followed the process as dictated in the federal regulations, 23 CFR and the air quality stuff and transit and so on. So just a heads up that that's going to be happening in August, and we or them may be contacting you directly, to schedule, interviews or whatever. The second thing I wanted to mention is that next week, at the meeting of the Texas Transportation Commission, they're going to be unveiling the draft fiscal year 23 Unified Transportation Program. Right, so that's something that we've been waiting for many months, and we hope to see good news for El Paso projects. I'll physically be there as well, and we're having a meeting with Representative Ortega and the chair with the Texas administration on Monday, and Tomas, I think the El Paso district folks will be there as well. So we're dying to get good news or to know what's out there. But we don't know yet, but hopefully we'll be able to report good news later on. Also very important is that TxDOT will unveil the draft UTP on Thursday, but the formal comment period starts sometime in July. It's most of the month of July. So we've been encouraged, and obviously, I'll do the same thing, encourage all of us to provide comments. We'll come back here to the board and ask for formal comments, depending, of course, on what comes out. And but they are encouraging all of us to participate during the public comment period. So all of the comments and participation are part of the official public comment documentation. So just a heads up on that too. And that's it. That's all I have. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Eduardo? Okay, being no further items on the agenda, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you. We're adjourned. I don't think you have to do that. I think you can just, I think you can just get up and walk out.
Marisol?
You're adjourned. Wait a minute.
Marisol?
I'm okay. Something